Yo. One second. Just putting out a little ping. Okay. Um, and I'm also just recording. I assume you don't mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Um, all right. So, one second. I need to turn my volume. Sorry.
No
Okay.
worries.
So I think I might share an Excalibur. So I think what I'll do is I'll send you a link. So you can follow that if you want to, but I'll also just stream here. Off you're echoing. Um, okay, so I think it should be streaming. Is it streaming? One second, what's it doing here? Oh, that's kind of annoying. Is it not? Can you not see my screen right now?
I can't.
One sec. Yeah, because I feel like it'll be easier to not get lost in the weeds if I can screen share, but I think it's because I'm also capturing on Discord. It doesn't want me to screen share. Um, fuck, that's irritating. Okay, well, maybe I'll just take pictures for others or something. Um, fuck, I really think there should be a way to do this. Why is it doing that? Oh, okay, whatever. Um, all right. So, stalking our stuff. Okay, so first of all, I think that I kind of want to set the goalpost for what a reasonable criticism is, because I think you've said stuff about me just like nitpicking or being pedantic or something. So I kind of want to, at the outset, spell out the kind of criticism that it is, so that we both agree that if it is correct, it's a meaningful criticism. I assume that's a reasonable starting point.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that the kind of problem that the something has gone wrong response is going to have is that it comes out either not clearly being true or being true at the expense of being a straw man. So I think if you're out there in the public space, Nick, you got to mute yourself. If you're out there in the public space and one of the points you're running against some rival position is either not clearly true or a straw man, true at the expense of being a straw man, that would be worth being aware of. That would be the kind of thing that I would, for instance, want to know and avoid. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, the next thing I'd say is that I think that the something has gone wrong response is that kind of criticism. I think it has that problem where it'll either not clearly be true or it'll be true at the expense of being a straw man. I'll probably just kind of call that like the dilemma or something so I don't have to keep repeating it. Um, and I think maybe it's worth just talking about a one or two examples of it just so we have clarity on what it is. So I have your original one here, though this has been, there's two other versions of this now. So we'll talk eventually about all three. But the first one, along with this quote from Miles Donahue, I think.
Wait, sorry. You want to talk to me about a quote from Miles?
Sorry, I'm posting in general right now. So I'm kind of making a series of points. So the first point was just to get us on the same page about this kind of criticism is a meaningful kind of criticism. If something we're out there saying is either not clearly true or true at the expense of being a straw man, this is like important, we would want to know about this. The next thing I'm saying is that I think the something has gone wrong point is an example of a point that falls to that dilemma. And now I'm just giving some examples to show people making this point. So I'm not holding you to account for anything that Miles has said. I'm linking your first version there. So there's two others we can talk about after. And then I'm also providing a quote from Miles, which I think is making at base the same kind of point. So it's just to show that there's a little kind of family of.
I don't think the first version was phrased great. I think the newest version is better. Can we just talk about the newest version?
Well, I think my point is going to be that all three are going to fail the dilemma in a different way.
Okay,
so
can we just talk about how the third one fails the dilemma?
I'd rather not. I've kind of built up a way that I'd like to go through it, and I think that the first one, the reason it's worth talking about is because I'm going to talk about the psychology in a sec that I think is behind this. And I think that the first one, before doing moves to try to fix it, shows the psychology that gets people into this puzzle more clearly than the ones that you've tried to amend. So I mentioned the others to make it clear that you have made efforts to amend it. So I'm not trying to hold your feet to the fire over something that you've said and changed. Okay. But I also think the original version, and Miles, he's not gone through the correction thing, so his also looks like yours originally looked. I think those make it easier to see the psychology behind it. And that's sort of why I wanted to start there.
Okay.
Yeah, so yours here, it says, first, imagine that the initial conditions... So for context, for people listening, this is a reply to the stalking horse objection in the fine-tuning discourse. We'd talk about exactly what that is, but I think clearing up what it is will actually be part of clearing this up. So I'm going to sort of start from there. So this is Matthew. First, imagine the initial conditions of the universe were arranged to spell out made by God. Surely that would be evidence for the existence of God. But one could make the same stalking horse move there. One could say, obviously, if you build into your theistic hypothesis... Sorry, I just want to get some water. Even hypothesis that the designer is motivated to say made by God, then you predict the data. But if an atheist builds that into their hypothesis, they explain the data as well. Something has gone wrong here. The same thing, I submit, has gone wrong with fine-tuning. So that's the old Matthew quote. And then below is the one from Miles Donahue. So this is from a recent video that I forget the name of. To be probabilistically coherent, the proponent of this objection would have to say that there's no possible evidence against theism. Really? Are we sure about that? What price for the success of the stalking horse objection? I think it's clearly too high. The machinery of the stalking horse objection obviously goes wrong somewhere. So, yeah, there's this idea about obviously going wrong. And this is a bit of a side point, but I just want to talk about the psychology for a second. We can kind of keep it in mind or whatever as we go forward. I think that the reason... So we'll talk about whether this point is good or not, whether it makes sense. But I think that the reason that people make this, I think maybe on the atheist side too, I'm not sure. But I think people have some notion of what the stalking horse is like mechanically. Like it kind of comes in and in some way mimics something going on the other side. But I don't think people are often clear at the outset about its dialectical role. So they kind of fall into this weird problem of thinking it does too much. Now, I don't know if atheists really do that. There might be atheists who are deploying the stalking horse in a way where they're presenting it like it does more than it actually does. But I've seen this reaction from theists, and I think those two quotes sort of exemplify it. It's like, well, this thing, however exactly it's doing too much, it's somehow doing too much work. If that works, it's just, things seem fucked up, so there's got to be a problem with it. So, yeah, that's the point about the psychology. I think that basically my psychological hypothesis is that the something has gone wrong point comes from a kind of myopia, where you're looking just at how the stalking horse kind of mechanically comes into the conversation and gets constructed, but not really thinking clearly about its broader dialectical role. And I think doing that will make the something has gone wrong point kind of not seem really intuitive. Okay, so that's the psychology bit. And then I kind of want to break the intuition about it doing too much. So I'll just give two kind of examples of stalking horses. One that kind of an example of it being used effectively or not. And how that plays out in the dialogue. So say, for instance, that you are a parent and you notice that there's cookies missing from the cookie jar and there's crumbs around the cookie jar. There's this cookie missing incident, and you suspect that it's your kid. And so you give them, you present your hypothesis to them. You say, I think you took the cookies from the cookie jar. Now the kid advances a stalking horse. Obviously, you would never use these terms when talking to a child, but the kid says, no, I think a ghost did it. Why would you think I did it? Now, say that you get in a conversation with the kid and you point out all the things like the trail of crumbs going to their bedroom, the little, footprints in the crumbs that are child size, etc. And for everything you present, the child kind of modifies their ghost hypothesis. They're like, well, ghosts actually really do like cookies. My room is particularly haunted. And in fact, they manifest little footprints, though the rest of their physical body doesn't manifest. So, they explain all the same data. Now, it's not that something has gone wrong at this phase. You can always generate some kind of hypothesis that's going to equally predict the data. But the question is now how it does on other virtues. So, like, we might look at, are ghosts, consistent with our background information? Well, I think a lot of us here would probably say no. We don't believe in ghosts. That seems like inconsistent with what we know about how the world works. Or we might talk about what it does to our ontology. Does it add new kinds of things to our ontology that we wouldn't have otherwise? And the ghost theory just ends up doing like really poorly once you look at the other virtues. Like, yeah, it stalked the predictive power perfectly. It predicted all the same stuff, but it was like really inconsistent with background information. It inflated our ontology. And so the competing hypothesis that the kid took the cookie jar or took the cookies just does way better. So that's an example of a stalking horse failing. And how it fails. It's not that something has gone wrong by it being deployed. It just forces the conversation onto other virtues. You talk through those other virtues, and then you notice that the stalking horse theory does worse on all those other virtues, so it fails. An example of it doing well. So this is one from my actual life. So I was a little kid, and I was on the playground, and I didn't know the middle finger symbolized like fuck you or was a rude gesture. So I was talking with this little girl and I pointed at something on the wall with my middle finger. And she said, "You can't use your middle finger." And she kind of freaked out and she told the teacher. And I ended up actually getting suspended over this as a child. But, I tried to advance my stalking horse. I was like, no, and this was true, by the way. I did not know that this is a rude thing to do. I was just pointing, and I chose to use my middle finger. Now, that equally predicted the data, and if there were more epistemically virtuous adults around, they might have looked at the other virtues that we're now going to have to, make the case based on. And they might be like, background knowledge seems to get along with the other kids, doesn't seem particularly rude or to pick fights. You might look at other things, but the point is you get a kind of picture where it's like, these actually, both these hypotheses, the he's being rude or he just doesn't know, they both predict the data the same way. But when you look at the background knowledge, you don't see a clear advantage emerging. It just kind of looks like, yeah, the little kid pointing, like that is pretty consistent with our background knowledge about them, about what kids know generally, etc. So this is a case where you present the stalking horse, and then it forces the discussion to other virtues. And once you look at those other virtues, you go, actually, it seems like basically a tie. We shouldn't suspend this kid, but that didn't happen in my case. So yeah, that I think when you kind of look at the two cases, it should really, I think, diffuse any idea that there's something going wrong, that the stalking horse is like wildly overshooting or doing way too much. No, like the exact same thing. You could stalking horse gravity if you wanted to. Now
Yeah,
with
let
a
me. Yeah, can I?
yeah,
Uh,
I still have some stuff to get through. I was going to let you go after, but if you want to come in, I'll probably still want to continue to get through the rest of my
yeah,
bit
fine.
though.
I'll just say I agree with this account that like obvious. I don't think there's anything in principle wrong with uh having some stalking horse explanation where you just say, look, there's some other theory that explains the data, and then it comes down to the plausibility of the theory based on the other virtues. So there, I think we're in agreement.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Um, Yeah, so you could try to stalking horse gravity. You're just gonna get annihilated. Like, firstly, to stalking horse something like gravity, a mature modern scientific theory. I mean, just getting the data points, all the stuff that it predicts, right, so that you could even try to construct a horse in the first place would be like, you have to like learn physics to even start building a stalking horse. But you could, in principle, like learn enough physics to know all the major predictions and then generate some other theory that predicts them. But I mean, you just look at all these other virtues, and it's like, is it going to be more, simple than gravity? Is it going to be as mathematically elegant? And if you actually did do that, people would be like, oh, this model's better than gravity. But you just notice the bar is extremely high. It's not that it can't be done. The same move can always, in principle, be done. It's just that's more likely to be like the cookie jar case, where once you do it, it just totally fails on the other virtues, or it's really hard to not it's not like a logically impossible or something, but it's just difficult to construct the horse in the first place because you need a bunch of upfront data about physics to know the horse's shape. Okay, so now to your stuff. So you've made 3 versions of this, and I'll post the other 2 here also. So this is version 2, and then I guess version 3 I'll take a screenshot of right now. And I just want to what I want to say is that I think that all 3 of these still fall under the dilemma, just in different ways. So like the first one falls under the not clear it's true part of the dilemma. It's not really obvious there is anything that's gone wrong. But then when you precisify it to make it such that something has gone wrong, you do that at the expense of, I think, straw manning at least the stronger version of the stalking horse that someone could give. Now I could talk about why I think that's the case, but that's the end of the general kind of stuff I want to say. It's just all that background, and then laying out your 3 things and pointing out that each of them fails the dilemma in a different way. So something has gone wrong. The first one, that is not clearly true. It's not clear from the kind of description you give above that anything went wrong. That was just them spelling out the hypothesis. Then the second one, you correct it by adding a claim at the end of the atheist statement, which
Wait, sorry,
is,
can we just go one by one about these?
yeah, I think we agree on the first one, which is why you
Great.
altered it, right?
Well, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think I phrased it very well. But I mean, when I said that something goes wrong, I was referring to if you say to like the full inference where you're like, where you treat the stalking horse argument as if it diffuses the made by God case. So like it's fine to stalking horse it and to come up with some hypothesis. But if you thought that was a sufficient, I mean, let me see. I forget exactly how I phrased it. You put it in general, right?
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think you're going to jump to the third one. I'm on number 2 right now, assuming we agree on the problem with number 1.
Um.
They're in
Uh.
order.
Yeah. Um. So I guess, yeah. So I don't think this was phrased very well. But when I said, but one could make the same stalking horse move here, one could say, and then I explained what the stalking horse hypothesis is, and then I said something has gone wrong here. What I was saying was something has gone wrong insofar as you make that move and treat that as being a decisive objection to the stalking horse in the made by God case.
So let's just go.
I'm not saying something is going wrong with like where I'm saying something goes wrong is not with the previous sentence, but with the sentence before that, where you make the same stalking move here. But I don't think it was phrased very well. So
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah.
Well, there's a further question about whether this was a phrasing error or a thinking error. So I don't think it was a phrasing error. I do think it was a thinking error. I think that it's better explained by my psychological hypothesis. That's why I mentioned the psychological stuff. But that's also not something we have to quibble over. If you want to advance a reason that it's more plausible to, think that it was just not stated clearly, that's fine. Also, I don't have an extremely strong belief there, but I lean decently towards you, Miles, both doing the same kind of thing, not thinking clearly about the dialectical role of the stalking horse, just kind of thinking about how it works mechanically and going, oh, something's gone wrong here. But if you get precise about the dialectical role, I think that kind of falls apart. So
I think if the idea was just that there's something, if your interpretation of what I was saying was that there's something in principle illicit about coming up with some alternative hypothesis to explain the data. I guess the reason I realize that just if you read the text, that's a plausible reading of it. But I think, that would just be a ridiculous claim. So then it's not one that I believe. And I think if you, I guess probably it's not productive to haggle over what was going on in my mind. But if you just listen to interviews or whatever that I did shortly after, in my debate with Detroit, I think I'm pretty clear on how
I can understand why you would want to argue about it to some extent. I get this is why I also said we might not want to focus on it, because whether you fucked up isn't the most important thing, but you might want to say, well, I didn't fuck up, because that would say something bad about my general competence. And I do think it says something when you consider it with some other things about your competence on this topic. So I'm not hiding from that insinuation. That's part of why I make the psychological point. But it also isn't the main thing that I want to argue about. So that's why I kind of tell you can make a counter claim, point out why it is plausible that it. Sorry, just let me finish. Why it is plausible that it's just typing error or something like that, and then we could move to the other point, having both had a chance to express ourselves.
I think it's. I don't think it was phrased maximally clearly, but I don't think there are two readings of the sentence. Where one reading is where you say something has gone wrong here. You think the thing that's going wrong is the person building a stalking horse. And then the other one is that you make the same stalking move here. So there are two previous sentences. And one is you interpret the sentence as just referring to the previous one. And the other one is you refer to the broad move made in the previous two sentences. And then I guess, so I don't think that the text alone makes it clear which one I'm talking about. I think what makes it clear is that, one of the claims is obviously ridiculous and not one I would make. And then it also doesn't fit well with, I think, what you'll find me saying. If you see interviews I did about this, I wasn't befuddled about the notion that you could come up with some alternative hypothesis to explain some pattern of data.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think sometimes I fuck up on things that I know reasonably well. I think I'm okay at programming, and sometimes I make a program where after I look at it and I'm just okay, well, I was I don't know what I was smoking that particular day. So yeah, I think it's possible.
Yeah, so it's true, right? Maybe I fucked up here uniquely, but just if you notice that at the time I was saying the sentence is ambiguous, and you notice at the time in all other contexts I was saying the other thing, and one of the things is ridiculous, then you should think, oh, probably the interpretation is the one that corresponded with what the guy said on the other occasions and the thing that's not ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that we would have to talk about sort of the empirics there, what exactly you did say, what it's plausible you were thinking, what you have said in other contexts, and it'll turn into a kind of empirical question about how probable it was that this was a thinko rather than a typo kind of thing, or imprecision versus actually making a kind of thinking error.
I think if you read the paragraph...
Well, just before I want to dial in what we're talking about. I'm happy to give you the last word on that part, but you said your time was limited to 45 minutes. So
yeah, I could go
do
for a
we?
bit longer than 45 minutes. I guess I didn't want to go like for an interminable 2-hour thing, but I could go for like an hour, an hour 20.
The point I'm making is just there's 2 points. There's the one about what most plausibly explains this. So I've advanced my kind of psychological explanation about myopia, and you have. I don't know exactly what your explanation is, but you have in some way a way of fighting back against that. Like maybe it's inconsistent with other stuff we know about you or that you were saying at the time. We could get into that. I'm not as prepared for that, but we could talk about it and I could lay out my general thoughts. But that is also different than the main point, which is more important to me, which is the one about how all three corrections still have the same problem. So I don't want to shortchange you. I'm happy to let you say what you want about that and have the last word, but I also want us to clearly choose what we're going to talk about. And I suspect we both want to prioritize the actual going over the three comments over the what accounts for making them in the first place. But
yeah, I guess I'll just make one final thing, which is I'm pretty sure what I did was I literally just added the stalking horse thing like later because it wasn't in the first draft of the article. And then I added something later, and I think I literally did not edit it at all. And I think you can just see in the first image there are like, there's a typographical error where like there are 2 quotation marks in front of the made by God. And then the last sentence is like kind of shitty where it's like the same thing I submit has gone wrong with fine tuning, when really what I meant was the same thing I submit has gone wrong with the objection to fine tuning, with a stalking horse objection to fine tuning. So really, I think like this was just an unusually, typographically impoverished paragraph that I wrote.
Okay, well, I've heard that theory. I've advanced my own. More could probably be said for both. But do you want to go into the talking about the three versions and if they fall with where they fall with the dilemma? Yeah. So basically, the first one, just to be clear, I don't think we disagree at all about this. Whatever it is that accounts for it, it's sufficiently vague that it's not actually clear it's true that something has gone wrong. Presumably we agree about that with the first one.
I think there's a reading that there's like a sensible reading on which it's true, but I think
that's compatible with what I just said.
Yeah, let's see. Is it clear that? Let's see. So sorry, just repeat exactly how you phrased what you just asked.
I don't remember literally verbatim, but the general point is it's not clearly true. It's sufficiently vague that it's not clear if it's true. Right? What has gone wrong? That's why I was saying that kind of stuff initially. What exactly is it that went wrong?
Yeah, I think it's clear. Maybe it's like at the borderline between being clear and being not clear, where it's like I think your interpretation of what I said would just be like so ridiculous that I don't think I said it. So I think like a sensible reader.
Wait, my interpretation of what you said. What's my interpretation of what you said?
So your interpretation, where when I say something has gone wrong here, I'm referring to just the practice of erecting a stalking horse.
No, I to be clear, my theory is that you're not thinking that clearly about it. You're kind of mechanically focused on just, I don't know, something like maybe how it gets constructed or deployed in the conversation. But I'm not saying you have a clear notion of what the problem is, and it's this retarded thing. It's my hypothesis is the psychological one is you sort of think you have something that's gone wrong precisely because you're not being clear. And if you get clear, it'll be obvious that it's either something retarded like a straw man or just not true. So I think you might have a misunderstanding of what I'm saying there with the psychological point.
Yeah, I think the kind of like way that if you're reading carefully, the way you'd read it is you'd interpret it as being something that's gone wrong in treating the stalking horse if you made the stalking horse objection in the made by God case and treated it as an objection, that something has gone wrong there. But I think this will just get us back into quibbling over the wording there. So maybe.
Well, I know, but I don't want to just dismiss it as a quibble, because when I look at this, it's not obvious to me something has gone wrong. I think you have to do a bunch of filling in before that becomes obvious. And I think that's why you corrected it.
So
Presumably,
say
if you
something has
thought it
gone
was
wrong,
completely or so clear as to not be a problem, that you wouldn't make a
things can be
correction.
clear enough to be a problem, unclear enough to be a problem, even if they're not like, even if I think the like correct reading is like the one you should have is one thing, where it's like, even if, only, 5% of readers are misled, 5% is too much.
You think only 5% of readers would be confused over what's gone wrong when they look at that?
I said even if only 5% of readers would be confused.
That's why I
And
asked, because it wasn't clear if you were
yeah, okay.
saying that or not.
I
Are
don't
you
have like a
suggesting it would?
strong view on what percentage of readers it would be.
Yeah, because to me, I look at that. I mean, it wasn't obvious to me, wasn't obvious to Avi, wasn't obvious to Lance, wasn't obvious to anyone who was taught. Like, none of us could figure out what the fuck it was that went wrong. So, from my
Oh,
point of
but
view,
I didn't take that passage didn't specify what had gone wrong, and that so I wasn't purporting to explain in that passage what was wrong with the inference. I was just describing that clearly something is wrong if you treat this as an adequate reply
no, but
to.
you're adding to it though. You we're just talking about the first before you make any correction, because what it sounds like you're going right now. If you understand me as I want to be understood, it's a more reasonable point. Which I still have issues once you make the adjustment, actually, and we'll talk about that. But no, I'm saying as written, it seemed like a bunch of smart people looked at that and no one could see what went wrong. So it seems like it's sufficiently unclear that, it's not obvious if it's true.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't share that assessment. Well, so sorry. So you say it's not clear what has gone wrong.
It's not
I
clear that
didn't
it's true that anything has gone wrong.
um
What has gone wrong
yeah.
is like it feels like you're altering what I said a little bit. Like I'm saying you say something has gone wrong. I read that whole thing and I go, "What? It's not clear anything went wrong. What is it that's gone wrong?"
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have an exact. Yeah, so if it's true, I haven't like sampled readers, and I mean, well, anyways, but maybe it's true that the sentence was sort of badly enough written that it would have misled a lot of people, so that then if we're just looking at how most people would understand the sentence, then it would come out false or whatever. Uh,
Or
so
just not
okay,
clearly
so
true. I don't need to go that far to
yeah,
false.
yeah, sure, not clearly true. Yeah, okay. I mean, fair enough. I don't know. I don't actually know what portion of readers would have been confused, but or would have interpreted the sentence differently from how I claim it ought to have been interpreted. But if it's true that it would have been a high percentage, maybe it would have been.
I don't need to
Then
claim
yeah,
that either. But I understand you're trying to find middle ground. I just don't want my position to be exaggerated. So I'm not saying it has to be a high amount. We also might not be concerned with lay people. We might think that lay people reading this will not have fine grained enough concepts to like fully track or see an issue at all. But if, for instance, if even like 10 or 20% of philosophically minded people or people with some background in philosophy were having that kind of reaction, that would be to me a problem. It's not like, oh, biggest fuck up in the universe. It's just that I wouldn't want that as a result of something I wrote. I would view that as a bad outcome and want to change that, which is why I opened with asking, we would
I
sort
mean,
of, yeah.
certainly, yeah, I certainly agree that I don't think the sentence was phrased well, and that's why I changed it.
Yeah, because as phrased, it seems plausible, and we saw it happening to at least some degree, that people are just going to be confused and have the reaction of, well, I don't see what went wrong. What does he think went wrong there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, I mean, look, if I agree, the sentence should have been clear, and hence the changes to the sentence.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the first one. Yeah, and there's something, I don't know exactly how to tie it in, but there's just some vague floating around idea of like it kind of being like a nitpick or something like this. And I don't know if you're insinuating that in anything you say, but that's sort of why I tried to set the goalpost at the outset so that we wouldn't get into, well, like, oh, this is just a nitpick. Because I mean, I think we agree, and this is why you would change it, that if anything we write sort of has that consequence. I mean, obviously not like I don't know, text messages or little I don't know, DMs or something, but our actual published work, if it's causing that reaction in any significant amount of people who are decently equipped to process the work, that's just undesirable. We just don't want that. It's not the biggest fuck up ever. It doesn't. I'm sure I've made equivalent fuck ups. It doesn't. I don't know. I'm not trying to make a greater claim than I'm not trying to claim it's most people, although that could very well be true. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't have the intuition. So yeah. I mean, I think we basically agree. It's sufficiently unclear. That's not obvious. It's true. At least maybe we'll say to like reasonably equipped people or something like that. And so it's worth altering. And if you want my motivation for making it, it's just I see people making that point, and I go, it looks like people think there's something wrong where there isn't something wrong. So I feel like I think there's not something wrong. So I just want to kind of make it clear that this does not establish that there is something wrong. That was my initial kind of motivation. So I don't think that's a nitpicky or pedantic motivation. I think that's a reasonable motivation. It's just wanting.
I mean, I guess
yeah.
a thing can be kind of nitpicky, and it can also be reasonable to propose to give, like, if there's a sentence where I phrase something badly, I feel like if you're like you are disagreeing with the phrasing, maybe it's a nitpick, but it's worth pointing out.
Well, it's not obvious it's just the phrasing. I mean, this is where we disagree, right? You want to say you had all the concepts aligned just fine and you phrased it wrong. I want to say it's more plausible you actually didn't. So I'm not necessarily granting that it was just a phrasing correction. But even if it were just a phrasing correction, yeah, it wouldn't, that wouldn't necessarily be a negative thing. And I also don't think it being a phrasing correction makes it a nitpick. Are all phrasing corrections nitpicks, or are there things that we can say that seem, I don't know, sufficiently like misleading or confusing that we would actually care not to say them? In fact, I think a good marker for if it's
maybe a nitpick is like, I think there can be legitimate nitpicks. Maybe
okay. No, that's fine. If you don't mean nitpick in a way that carries any negative connotation, like something that you just as well may not have heard of and whatever, if you're not saying something like that when you say nitpick, then it probably isn't a problem. I just don't like the negative connotation. Like, oh, you're just bringing up something that is fucking worthless. Like that. That's what nitpick sounds like, and I don't think it's worthless.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so maybe we're just quibbling over like the yeah, okay. So I think maybe
I'm fine with what you said, though. If you say I don't mean nitpick in that way, I think nitpicks can be. I think there are cases of nitpicking that I would want to be made aware of and that are important and meaningful. Then I don't think I care about arguing about whether this is nitpicking or not, because.
Okay, should we move on to the second one?
Yeah. So yeah, then the second and third actually both have the same problem. But it's basically, so the way that you, so I don't want to use uncharitable framing. Like I would sort of say the way that you rescue it, you might object to that framing, but you keep the whole thing the same. I believe it's word for word identical, except this sentence that you append at the end of the part where you're quoting the person running the stalking horse. And you say, so this isn't evidence for a designer. And we talked in text about how you mean that, and you mean that it's not the case that in light of the stalking horse being presented, we on net have reason not to favor theism. We're aligned so far?
Sorry, I was distracted for a second. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
That's okay. So you keep the quote of the stalking horse runner the same, but you append this bit at the end where you say, so this isn't evidence for a designer. And I'm just clearing up what you mean when you say this isn't evidence for a designer, because we clarified that in text, actually. I was like, well, there's some designers who it's evidence for. And you're like, no. What I mean when I say it isn't evidence for a designer is I mean, like, overall, we don't have reason to, it's not something in virtue of which overall we have no reason to favor theism.
So when I say it's no evidence,
didn't say that sentence well, but
like,
you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, when I said in quotes, so this is no evidence for a designer, what I meant was like it's no evidence that the probability of the proposition there is a designer doesn't go up. Not there exists no designer for which the probability of that goes up in light of the evidence. Just like you might say, uh, suppose you're like, um, uh, uh, suppose you're like someone's like, oh, the person probably, the murder weapon was a knife, so it was probably done by a teacher, and then you're like, uh, well, the fact that it was done with a knife, that is not evidence that it was done by a teacher. And then you're like, well, but there's some teacher that it's evidence that it was done by, namely, the teachers who love to do murders with knives. Okay, fair enough. But like what I meant pretty clearly was, yeah,
Yeah, I mean the way I was understanding you is when you say evidence for a designer, what you mean is on net all the reasons favoring a designer.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, and I think that will just come out being not what anyone competent running the stalking horse is saying. So I think it'll be true that something has gone wrong with that. If someone says, something along the lines of like, here's my stalking horse. Now theism is no better off than atheism or naturalism. Well, I mean, something would have gone wrong there because all the stalking horse does is it forces parity on like predictive power, and then you quibble over the other virtues. So if the atheist is just ignoring that whole other part, quibble over the other virtues, and just saying I get victory, then yeah, I mean, of course something has gone wrong there, but that's like a stupid horse or something. That's like not the that's not how I've ever heard anyone competent run the stalking horse. I think when competent people run it, they modestly they might say something like this just forces the battle onto other virtues, or if they made a more aggressive move with it, they might say, and it's not it's not clear that the naturalist pays a greater price than the theist on any other virtues when invoking their stalking horse. So they might make like a kind of positive claim that it also does equal or better on all the other virtues, or they might just put it out there and say, okay, predictive power is equalized. Now fight me on the other virtues. One of those is like a bit more modest than the other, but those are like the kind of things that I think that someone competent running the stalking horse would say, not something like, oh, now theism is fucked.
yeah. So I guess when I hear the stalking horse, so the most common version I've heard is what people say is like, okay, there are a range of conceivable designers, just like there are a range of conceivable non-design hypotheses. And then they say, and so if you build in to your hypothesis that there's a disposition to design or to fine-tune the universe, then we can build into our hypothesis that there's a disposition to fine-tune the universe. And then there will be no relative probability boost in uh, uh, the design hypothesis gets no relative probability boost overall. So it's like the overall like both theories, you can pick out a specific version that's a design hypothesis um, that predicts fine tuning, but it's not any more likely given a designer than given a non-designer. Um, so that's how I take people to generally be running it. Um, uh, yeah, and then if that's how they're running it, uh, then I think if you took that seriously, where they're purporting to show that it doesn't raise the probability of the design hypothesis. So the p design after you learn about fine tuning doesn't go up. And then I'm saying that I feel like if you apply that consistently, you could make a similar move uh, about the made by God case. And so then you'll have to now, I mean, this doesn't like close the door on a stalking horse hypothesis. There might still be some reason to think that there's some good stalking horse hypothesis, which renders the probability of fine-tuning given no design higher or equal to the probability given design. But it at least like it at least means that the like initial move that I hear lots of people making of just being like, you build into your hypothesis that there's fine tuning, so we build it into ours, but this is much too simple. Wait, I'm sorry. Can I have like one? Can I like pause for 1 minute?
Yeah,
I just need to transfer to my phone from my computer. And
sure.
then, okay.
I don't know if this intermission is a good time to say anything, but
Yeah.
when I hear it being run, yeah, I hear that move, but I don't take that to mean that the mere fact that this was pointed out and that someone someone just said proposed the naturalistic hypothesis where they say, "Oh, I can build things in too," mean I never took that to mean, oh, well, therefore, it couldn't be that because I simply posited that it couldn't be that uh, the theistic one is more probable than the naturalistic one. Rather, I took that to mean that, well, based on everything presented so far, there isn't a clear reason to think that the theistic one is, in fact, more probable than the other one. Once you frame it that way, it's on the theist to provide a reason, which is other virtues. So yeah, all of those things are said, but that it doesn't follow that if you did this, then you must be able to consistently do this in the ATE case.
Well, wait. I don't know if we're talking about the AT stuff yet.
Well, that's what he said. He said if you could make a consistent argument for this other case.
Okay, I'd have to think about what he said, but you just I think that the problem is like the last sentence. So this is an evidence for a designer. It's like, well, it seems like what he means when he says that is that on net design doesn't do which why are we talking about design also? It should be about theism. There's a bit of waffling that happens there, but he's saying on net, like, considering all the evidence, whatever the virtue they might be. Oh, okay, wait, he's back. Yo. Were you in the middle of saying something when you left, or did you want to hear my follow up?
No, I think I was basically done.
Yeah, so it's just this isn't evidence for a designer. If we understand that means that on net theism doesn't do better than atheism, that's just not what I've ever heard anybody say. I mean, there's still all the other virtues to fight over. So it seems like you're getting the sentence to come out true at the expense of making the quote for the stalking horse quote into something that no one competent would say. It's the other horn of the dilemma.
Yeah, so sorry. So I mean that's not so if we're looking at the relative likelihood of design hypotheses versus not design hypotheses, and we're asking whether the design hypothesis just goes up in relative probability. For that, you won't have to consider anything other than fine-tuning. You'll just look at, is the data of fine-tuning likelier if there's a designer versus if there's not a designer? So this wouldn't settle whether the overall probability of design is more than 0.5. It would just settle the question of whether the overall probability of design given fine-tuning is higher than the overall probability of design given there not being fine-tuning.
I'm not sure I understand how what you're saying connects with what I'm saying. Do we agree that when you add this bit, so this isn't evidence for a designer, that transforms? I'm just going to say the atheist. It could be someone else running a stalking horse. We'll just say the atheist, I guess. When you say so, this isn't evidence for a designer, you're making that part of what the atheist says. But that seems like not what any competent person would say. So it seems to me like you're getting the statement to come out true that something has gone wrong, but at the expense of, putting something on the atheist that they're not going to say if they're competent.
I mean, I think Detroyer says that. I think Detroyer's view is that the probability of design isn't any higher given fine tuning than given that there was not fine tuning.
Well, he's in here, so I can. Troy, do you have your mic?
Yeah, I can't talk for very long. What's up?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be kind of trivial, but I'm sure you wouldn't say, because I can create a stalking horse that has equal predictive power, theism on net is.
Wait, dude, you're like bungling what I said. He said. What I
Huh?
said was
Wait, what you said, he said. Sorry, to be clear, I'm just going off what's written in the text and how you explained the meaning of this as an evidence for a designer when last we spoke in text.
Wait. Well, you replaced for a designer with for theism.
Oh, sorry. Did I say okay? Sorry. That was a speaking error. Okay.
So I mean,
well,
Troy,
but wait a sec, because I think you're going to frame it differently. I want to just.
Can I just ask my question of Detroit, and then we can haggle over like exactly what the question that you need is.
Well, you did cut me off as I was putting it to him. I just say, okay, you.
Okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, you can ask your version. I'll ask my version, and then we can haggle over.
Well, I don't know why we're talking about another version. We should just let's converge on the version, because the thing is, I think probably why you cut in is because you could tell. Well, I mean, the theism. If I said theism by accident, that's a problem. But I think that when I phrase it, as I understand it, it's going to be obviously not something that he'd say. So look at the last sentence. So this isn't evidence for a designer. You told me that what that means is on net, theism doesn't do better than atheism. But nobody competent is going to...
Wait, do you mean on net a designer isn't likelier?
Sorry. Yes, on net... yeah, sorry, just... It's weird because a bit lower you go into this other stuff that trips me up a bit, where you say this is specifically an argument for God, not for some general... So that's fucking my head a little bit. But what I am saying is, in text, you said the way to understand it is that it's about whether one theory does better on net than the other. And you're saying this isn't evidence that for a designer. So you said isn't...
Oh, can I clarify what I mean by on net? So I didn't mean like overall, taking into account all things. I just meant whether or not the overall likelihood is higher. So just like if like should you think that the probability of like should you think that the overall probability of design is higher given the fact that there's fine tuning than if there wasn't fine tuning?
So tell me if my understanding of what you're saying isn't right, though I feel like it might have shifted. It sounds like in fact, maybe we should look up the text, but I was understanding you, because if this isn't what you're saying, we have to then understand the new thing and think that through. Although I think it'll fall on the same dilemma. What I understood you to be saying is that when you say this isn't evidence for theism, you mean on net, the evidence for theism isn't any better than atheism. That's how I was understanding that.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. When I talked about whether it's evidence for theism, the question is just, is the probability of theism higher than the probability of theism would have been if there wasn't fine-tuning?
The probability of... Wait, are we talking about theism now, or are we talking... Did you just say theism? Did I miss
you? Theism. You said theism, and then I said theism as well.
Oh, it's my fault. Okay, so sorry. So what is the meaning supposed to be when you say this isn't evidence for a designer? Because the question is basically if that's a thing that an atheist would say or not, a competent proponent of the argument.
So I think different ones... Yeah, so I think different ones say different things about this. But
But I mean, there are many who say that it's not evidence for a designer in the sense that they think that the probability of theism given that there's fine tuning is not any higher than it would have otherwise been. Sorry, of a design. Now I'm doing it. The probability of a designer given fine tuning isn't any higher. So they're like, you should have take your credence in a designer before you learned about fine tuning, and then take your credence in a designer after you learned about fine tuning. And there are lots of people, I think, including Detroyer, who say the probability of a designer after you learn about it shouldn't be any higher.
That depends on what's in the background for how Detroit will answer that question.
Yeah, so what I'm inclined to do, the thing is, I was understanding you as meaning something else. So now if there's a different meaning being given than what you clarified earlier, I feel like I'd have to think it through and see if it's something that the atheist would say or not. So what do you mean when you say, so this isn't evidence for a designer?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? You just cut out for a sec.
Yeah, I feel like honestly I'm slightly confused at this point about what's being said here. I don't know if Avi wants to chime in. When you say this isn't evidence, yeah, it's specifically, are you looking at the same quote? When it says this isn't evidence for a designer, it sounds like we're being given now a new meaning for how to interpret that. So it's not that on net design is no better off than non-design, because that I think will fall on the straw man arm. We're being given something else now, so we're trying to understand what that is and then determine if it falls on the straw man arm.
Just means
Can I just say briefly that
been raised. The posterior after updating on that is higher than the prior. For that.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, that's just the standard Bayesian account of how evidence works.
Right.
Yeah, Avi,
I don't know
the
what
point is, it's not that he's only going to say that in a narrow sense, But if you inform in a broader sense, which I think is a more relevant one, well, some would say, if you're allowed to inform your background knowledge about things about how language works and stuff, then he wouldn't say that. Like, he would say that it's evidence for design.
Sorry, are we talking about the fine-tuning case or the made by God case?
The made by God case.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought we were talking about the fine-tuning case. So yeah, I agree that. Yeah. So I agree that
the initial conditions of the universe were arranged to spell out made by God. Surely that would be good evidence for the existence of God. But one would take the same stalking horse objection. One would say, obviously, if you build into your theistic hypothesis the designer is motivated to say made by God, then you predict the data. But if an atheist builds into their hypothesis, they explain the data as well. So this isn't evidence for a designer. It's that last part there. So this isn't evidence for a designer. But I don't think a competent atheist, would say that if they're permitted to inform their background knowledge of things like language and stuff. Like, they would say that is evidence for a designer if I am allowed to inform my background knowledge about how language works.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that a competent atheist would say this. I'm just saying I think there's a parody argument. So it's like, I mean, it's not like a perfect parody, because obviously just the plausibility that there's some naturalistic or non-design hypothesis that explains fine tuning is a lot higher than the probability there's some non-design hypothesis that explains the initial condition spelling out made by God. But I'm just
you're
saying,
trying to say if they could say it in the FTE case, if this sort of thing works in the FTE case, then you should theoretically be able to make it work in the ATE case. It would be absurd if you made it work in the ATE case, so you should think there's something wrong with this process.
Yeah.
Right. So then if it's all in that category, I just think the conditional is false. I think there's two features that almost essentially fully explain the motivation, the persuasion of ATEs, and neither are present in the FTE case. The two features are the chainsaw to the background knowledge that the naturalist is forced to propose a naturalistic hypothesis. And the second feature is the specificity feature of the evidence that points either to theism directly or to a specific type of theism, and neither are present in the fine-tuning context. And if you were to take the ATEs and divorce them of those two features, they wouldn't really provide the persuasive force. Like, for example, if you took if the stars spell, instead of spelling made by God, they said made by Avi Bitterman, and you'd ask, okay, well, is that evidence for theism? Like, okay, well, and this was before.
Wait,
And
I feel like that would be evidence
Maybe
for.
so.
Yeah, that would be
Not as
evidence for
much.
theism.
or at least it would be very well for theism specifically, as opposed.
Yeah, it would be
Hold
evidence
on.
for some. I mean, it would be evidence
Well,
for theism, I think,
Wait.
but it wouldn't be like.
Well,
Uh,
wait,
It's-
because there's also a bunch of
still be-
naturalistic hypotheses that are going to go strongly up. Naturalistic design hypotheses that are going to go up. It's not clear to me that.
Sure, but different incompatible things can get confirmation from the same data. Right?
No. But
I mean,
okay. So let me ask it this way: like, is that going to be evidence for bare theism over bare naturalism? And
yeah.
that's not clear to me. That if it says made by Avi Bitterman.
Oh, I think that
So-
would be because it's like there are different ways to explain it. So one way you explain it is with like aliens or ghosts or whatever. Whoa, I just ripped my shirt a little bit. So that's one way you can explain it. And then another way you can explain it is with is with theism, where you think God did it directly. And then the idea is just that the probability of the non-theistic hypotheses that explain it, given theism, is equal to the probability of the non-theistic hypothesis given atheism. And so then, or at least roughly equal. So then it's like, suppose aliens did it. Well, aliens having done it wouldn't be evidence either way. So if aliens did it, that's no evidence either way. Well, so it's like the things that could do it are either things that don't give evidence either way, or is God, in which case it would decisively raise the likelihood. So I think it would be evidence. It wouldn't be amazing because it's weird enough.
it's not. Wait,
but
hold
I
on.
don't
I'm
think.
not sure
Yeah.
how that. No,
Wait,
I'm
okay.
not sure that
But
works.
before you, because the thing is, you
But
guys
here's
are
the
now.
main point.
Well, just
let me
one.
get this last thing. Here's the main thing. The main thing is, if one wants to take the view that that's not that evidence for theism over non-theism, it's not a reductio. Like, there, you can heckle, you can argue over that, but the whole point of this thing is that you're supposed to be a reductio if you say no. Like that's the whole thing with ATs. With ATs, it's supposed to be that if you say it's not evidence for theism over naturalism, you are in a reductio. And it's not clear that if you divorce the ATEs of those two features, neither of which are present in the fine-tuning case, that you're in a reductio. You may disagree. You may like have a different intuition about it. You may have some arguments for it, but you're not in a reductio territory. That's the point.
also just quick, if something else is controlling the initial conditions, other than God, I would think there'd be some evidence against theism, but I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You're talking about the initial conditions. Sorry, I thought we were in the star case. Yeah, I mean, I think it would still raise the likelihood of theism. Though it would be weird.
To be clear, the star case, we were talking about the initial conditions star case, where you say the initial conditions spell out in some way made by God.
Oh, sorry. I thought
There
we
weren't
were
stars
talking
in the
about.
initial conditions, so it's sort of like blending two things together. But anyway,
Yeah. I thought we
Sure.
were talking about just the normal star case, where just like.
Yeah, but even if,
Well,
even
to
in
be
the normal
clear,
star case,
sorry,
you
we
have
should
to
we should
evaluate
be we
it.
should be clear. He's said the initial conditions of the universe were arranged to spell it out. So I don't think he actually said stars necessarily. Just
But just to be clear, even if we were in the normal star case, we would also have to divorce it of the chainsaw to the natural sciences condition. So we would have to posit a hypothetical where we weren't aware that stars don't do this and stuff like that. We didn't have a background science that this is not the natural order of how star formation happens, such that they end up spelling things out in a language-like manner. Like, if we were divorcing, if we divorce both of those conditions from the ATEs, then it's really not convincing that there really would be much evidence for.
Wait, sorry. So imagine the initial conditions. So we have no theory about how stars work, and the initial conditions, they spell out like love one another or something.
Mhm.
Do you think that would be evidence for theism? Or let's say they spelled out love one another just in all human languages. So it's like first in English, then in French, then in whatever.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry,
I
why
don't
are we
really...
flipping between theism and design?
No. He. Oh well, that's a different question. But you could ask it for both of the.
Well,
I mean, well,
I also I just I
theism
think
is the
we're
relevant one. For
Yeah, sorry,
theism,
yeah. Let's do design. So do you agree design? Well, I certainly think that
design is the
if the
part.
initial conditions of the
Yes, because
universe
that's
spelled
the
out
language. But no
made.
one would disagree with that. No one would disagree with the design part.
yeah.
Okay, sorry, wait.
Sorry,
So
I
if
just
fluid,
can I have just 1 second? Because I
Well,
think we've
depends on the
slightly departed from the point that I'm trying to get across. Because the thing is, when I was given the different semantics there, I'm not totally sure how to think about that. So that's what I want to clear up, because
So what I wanna say-
wait 1 second, just for the framing. So the question here is whether this isn't evidence for a designer is actually something that a competent atheist would say.
I think I think at least many of them would say, of the fine tuning evidence, they would say, yeah, so this isn't evidence for a designer, where they think. I mean, it depends a little bit on how you interpret the word "so." Actually, where it's like if you're treating it as like some like deductive entailment of the fact that you can stalking horse it, I mean that clearly is wrong. But I think lots of people would say like that there is a stalking horse. Like they think because there's a stalking horse, and given the analysis I described earlier, where they're like, you can make your theism predict design or predict fine tuning, and I can make my atheism predict fine tuning. And then they say, so therefore, it's not evidence for design. I think that is the thing that atheists say. I think that actually is the thing. I mean, Detroyer's version is more sophisticated, but I think he'd basically agree with the inference that he agrees that it's not evidence for design.
No, that
And
depends on your
Detroyer's
background. Like he'd only
Yeah,
say
it's
that if you
obviously
narrow the
background
scope
relative,
of your
but yeah.
background to exclude language and stuff. Like,
So well yeah, just
sorry. Wait, I think aren't we currently talking about the fine tuning case?
what
rather
we're
than
talking about is we're talking right now about the case in the quote, which is the initial conditions spell something out, and we're talking about whether a competent atheist is going to make the kind of claim that you're attributing to them there.
What claim did I attribute to the competent atheist?
This isn't evidence for a designer.
Sorry,
After
and what is this?
the preceding paragraph,
Sorry,
you
I
could
don't have the
build.
text in front of me.
It's in general.
it's the one I.
It's
the
it's
one I
in
read.
it's in general.
I had it on my computer and now I'm like outside, so it's kind of weird to like
So
leaf through.
I want to try to settle that. I guess Avi and Troy can comment on this. So would a competent proponent of the stalking horse say you can build into your theistic hypothesis the designer is motivated to say made by God, then you predict the data, but an atheist builds this into their hypothesis, that explains the data as well, so this isn't evidence for a designer? Do we think that is something that a competent atheist running the stalking horse would say? That's sort of my question.
But that wasn't my claim.
I literally just read it.
He's trying
Sorry,
to,
wait.
Trying to say that, Isaac? What Matthew's trying to say is that if what the stalking horse is doing is working, whatever, if they think it works in the fine tuning case, then they're committed to saying this. They're like committed. It's not clear why they couldn't say this in the ATE case. Like that's what he's saying.
But I'm trying to understand if I'm thinking about the dilemma though. Like, just let me put this to you, Avi. My understanding was that you agree with the general analysis that this the something has gone wrong point, as we've seen it, has been either not clearly true, because it's not clear exactly what's being said, or when you dial things in to make it true, it comes out being a kind of uncharitable way of framing what the atheist is saying. So that's right. And that's what I'm trying to understand. One way to see if it's charitable is to go, would the most competent people running this say this particular thing that's being attributed to them?
Right. And what he's trying to say now what Matthew's trying to say is that's not what I mean. I don't mean this uncharitable way. What I mean is that it's like it's a conditional. It's like if you think it works in the case fine tuning, then it's not clear why you don't think it's going to work in the case of ATEs.
Wait, sorry. There's one thing that's kind of bugging me about what you're doing there. I want to talk about literally just the text, because I don't want to get into like what way can Matthew now try to modify. Like, we can talk about version 4, but we're talking about right now version 2, which I think will have the same problem as version 3, because they both say, so this isn't evidence for a designer. So right now, just I'm asking you this, Avi, because you've thought about this a bunch. Do you think that the best formulation of the stalking horse, or I don't know how best to phrase this, but you think someone competent running the stalking horse is going to say, you could build into your theistic hypothesis that the designer is motivated, say, made by God, then you predict the data. But if an atheist builds that into their hypothesis, they explain the data as well. So this isn't evidence of a designer. Do you think the so this isn't evidence for a designer part is something that belongs in the well-framed version of the stalking horse?
No, I think that only when you specify in like a hyper like narrow sense of background knowledge would anyone competent say that. And when it's clear that they're allowed to have relevant things in their background knowledge, I don't think anyone competent is going to say something like that.
And I also want Troy's assessment of that. Maybe he left. Yeah, he might have left. And why do you think that a competent proponent of the stalking horse wouldn't say, so this isn't evidence for a designer?
Well, once you're allowed to have things in your background knowledge like language, you look stupid if you say it's not evidence for a designer. We know that language is the sort of thing that agents design. They, in the sense that writing is design, or even non-writing forms of language. Yeah, it just makes you look like an idiot.
Right. They would only say this if you'd have to cancel out how, like, background knowledge or how they're using it, or something like that. So yeah, just sorry. Yeah, go for it.
The stalking horse point requires a claim not just about, you can construct alternatives that equally predict the data or something like that, but they need to be at least as likely antecedently. And so you have to add something like that in, right? And even if it's true in one case or on some background, it might not be true in some other case or on some other background, right?
Yeah, sorry. I guess part of what's holding me up is I'm trying to see how it answers the problem I have in my head, which is, so this isn't evidence for a designer. Like, for instance, would you say that, Troy? Or would you say something like, no, I mean, language is something we get from agents. I mean, there's a further point maybe that all the agents we know aren't divine. So if it's evidence for a designer, it's also evidence that designer isn't God. There might be further things to say like that, but presumably you see the language. If you're allowed your background knowledge, like about agents being the things that produce language, presumably you do think the probability of design goes up in virtue of that observation.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess there's different things we could be talking about here. Of course, I do think that. So part of my point is that if we're talking about a relatively empty background, right, where we're not including anything about language or how that sort of stuff tends to get produced, or what we would expect to produce that, then, like, I think the stalking horse point even more obviously applies in this case. But if we are allowed to include that, then I think then the stalking horse point would fail, not because you can't equally, come up with an alternative hypothesis. Sorry, you can't come up with alternative hypotheses that equally predict the data, but because they're going to be less plausible on that background.
It sounds to me like you're saying the only way you'd end up saying this isn't evidence for design would be if they canceled out your ability to appeal to other stuff, like your priors or background knowledge about agents or something like that. It sounds like you're saying, if I get to add details like that agents typically are the ones who produce language, I'm going to think that it does increase the probability of design to make this observation.
Yeah, of course.
So this is sort of what I mean when I say it's like the choice. It's a dilemma where you end up either saying something that's not clearly true, or if you dial it in so it does come out being true that something has gone wrong, then it seems like you take a kind of uncharitable view of the atheist, where they're saying something that you just ask them and they're like, oh, I wouldn't say that. Avi wouldn't say it. Troy wouldn't say it. I wouldn't say it.
Just to be clear on the other question, if aliens just made the stars spell something out, I actually do think that would be a small amount of evidence against theism, because that would cut against at least some versions of theism that are commonly purported today, like creationism, where God actually is the one that put the stars where they were. So I do think if it turned out to be that aliens were the one that arranged the stars, that is evidence, some evidence against theism.
So then,
but if we just went, I don't know, if we in the future manipulated the stars in our galaxy, would that count against theism?
Yes, because because
Okay.
it would cut against at least some of the theistic hypotheses, like the creationist ones, for example. Because those theistic
But I mean, it would
hypotheses
also cut against some
explicitly
of the
spell out.
atheistic hypotheses, right? In the
Yeah,
same
but it's
way.
but
and it would
more
count
so
in favor of
directly.
some other
No,
theistic
but the ones
hypotheses where
that are,
God maybe want us to control the galaxy. Like I don't know. I'm not
I think
sure
it would cut
how much
against
of
a
an
lot
impact.
more.
let's focus on the part we agree on, and let's just try to, because I know Matthew, his time is limited, so I'd like if we could just get through the last bit.
Mine is as well.
Yours is as well? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm leaving in a minute
Yeah.
too. I would just
Okay. Well, I mean, it seems like both Avi and Troy are both saying they would not make this statement, so this isn't evidence for a designer. So I think maybe Matthew, you kind of, I'm not sure. Do you sort of? Okay. What do you mean? This isn't evidence for a designer.
So I would say, so if we're fixing the background, and or then I would grant it. But if unfixed background, then it's not gonna. I just can't say. I can say it's true, right? Or it doesn't follow in any way.
Okay. I feel like we should. I don't know if we should think about that for a second or just take it back to Matthew. I guess we'll take it back to Matthew and just see what happens. Then if we need to go deeper into that, like the point is just you have this kind of dilemma of basically saying something that's not clearly true, or saying something that is true. Like, sorry, the statement something has gone wrong. That's the statement I'm talking about being true or not. You make it either not clearly true, like in the first one, when you don't really specify what's gone wrong, or you make it true, but at the expense of targeting a view that it seems like the competent proponents of the stalking horse will just disavow, or only express with a bunch of like caveats or something. So do you see the criticism there? How the latter two quotes, we can talk about just number 2, I guess, but you see how that's going to fall on the other side of the dilemma, where it's true that something has gone wrong if they've said that, but they wouldn't say that. Like Troy and Avi just said they would not say that.
Yeah. So I don't.
They're going to want to say that something's gone wrong, even on my analysis for both cases, right? So they're going to. I think if both sides are kind of careful, I think the proponent of the fine tuning argument or that style of reasoning is going to say that actually in both these cases, on the kind of minimal prior or minimal background, you should get confirmation of theism from either the fact that there's life-threatening conditions or the fact that there's awesome theistic evidence. And I'm going to say, no, you don't get on either, of course, on that same background. I guess they're going to want to say that something's gone wrong in both cases. I'm going to say no, nothing's gone wrong in either case. But it's not that something's gone wrong in both cases, because something has gone wrong in this case. And you show that by appealing to intuitions about this being evidence, given a more informative background, right? But anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So
Wait. So Isaac, I think you may be kind of misunderstanding. So, I wasn't commenting on. So, I mean, let's just read the paragraph. So it's like, one could say, if you build into your theistic hypothesis that the designer is motivated to say made by God, you predict the data. But if an atheist builds that, Wait, sorry. It's a little hard to read it because there's like a share thing.
Yeah,
in the
I know.
screenshot.
It's tripped me up also, but I'm following you. Yeah, the theistic hypothesis that the designer is motivated to say made by God, then you predict the data. But if an atheist builds this into
So I was saying. So I wasn't saying this is what actual proponents of the stalking horse arguments say. I agree. They think there is some asymmetry. I was just saying you could imagine a person making a parallel stalking horse argument about the made by God case. I'm getting some echo. I don't know who it's from, but
I hope it's not me.
yeah, it is from you, I think.
It is from me? Try
Well, I think you were
Yeah.
the only one unmuted at the time, but
Testing. Yeah, it is from you.
Oh, weird. Maybe it's I think it's my headphones going into my mic. My bad.
Yeah. So I wasn't saying that they would agree with this assessment. I was just saying that so it's like here's an analogy. Suppose someone's like
Sorry, by this assessment, you mean the assessment that this isn't evidence for a designer or that something has gone wrong?
Oh, sorry. Let me read.
Oh wait, I gotta go, but I was just wondering before I go, Matthew, how you feel about that interaction with with Lance?
I mean, I thought it was kind of deranged. How did you feel about the interaction?
I thought it was kind of funny. It's just funny because I wished him a happy birthday, and I was like, oh yeah, by the way, I went off on
Oh wait, it was his
Matthew.
birthday today?
It's his birthday today.
Oh wow, that's a
Yeah.
weird way to celebrate. Well, happy
Anyway.
birthday to Lance.
Mm.
Yeah. Have
Anyway.
other people seen this, by the way? The Lance,
I don't know
the
about
Lance
the people
crash.
on here.
Okay, I don't want to burn a bunch of time on Lance. I do think you should engage Lance, though. I think he's a very serious critic, and you don't want to.
I mean, Lance doesn't want to talk to me. I offered to talk with him, and then he also sort of insulted me gratuitously. So
Okay,
I somehow I don't.
I don't know the current shape of it. Let's not talk about the Lance one right now. Let's just use the
Anyway,
time effect.
Sorry, yeah, you asked. I forget exactly what the question you asked was.
You were saying something, but I was just pointing. I wasn't sure. You said like one of those words that points at a thing like this, and I was like, okay, by this, do you mean the statement this isn't evidence for a designer, or the statement something has gone wrong here? You might not remember what exactly you're saying, so it might not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't remember what I was saying.
We can go up.
Can I give you an analogy?
You can, but I just do you understand my point though, that if you say I'm targeting like a hypothetical person, not what anyone would actually say, it's like, okay, yeah, so you can get the criticism that something has gone wrong to come out true in that case. But again, that's like at the expense of targeting someone who would say something silly rather than the strongest version of the view.
Oh no, sorry, I think you're misunderstanding. So I think the analogy will be helpful to illustrate this. So imagine someone says it's okay to eat animals because they're not very smart. And then you could say, by the same logic, a person might say it's not okay to eat babies, or it's okay to eat babies because they're smart. Wait, sorry, did I say it's not okay to eat animals? Sorry, I meant the person with, sorry, let me restart over. The person says it's okay to eat animals because they're not smart. And then you're like, oh, but a person could similarly say it's okay to eat babies because they're not smart. And then they're like, well, but the best version of the view wouldn't say that. You're not purporting to, it's like when you say that a person could make the same move about babies, you're not purporting to represent what they would actually say. You're purporting to represent what follows from their position. And so similarly, I wasn't talking about what the stalking horse people would actually say. I was saying that there's a parity argument against the position.
Well, that sounds like it's just to grant that it falls on the side of the dilemma where it's not a good representation of what they're saying. Well, wait, when you say false, Avi?
Dude.
No, I'm saying it's the other horn. Then it's false. It's not. Then it is then look, if he's just saying something else where he's saying, no, I'm not saying that they would actually say something like that. I'm saying they're committed to saying something like that. Then I would, if it's provided they say something like that in the fine tuning context, then it's on the false end of the horn because they're not committed to saying something like that.
Well, wait, sorry, the dilemma I was giving was the not clearly true. Well, I guess you could put false under not clearly true, but not clearly true versus
sorry. Yeah, I'll minimally say it's not clearly true. It's in the not clearly true horn. Because
what?
if
Sorry,
you
what?
say
How
that-
are we ending up on the not clearly true horn? Because what
Yeah,
I was
he's
talking
not-
about was
he's
I
no
was
longer saying he's saying I wasn't, but by all the things I said in that quote.
on
I'm
quote
not-
is in
I
number
didn't-
2. We're talking about number 2 right now.
By all the things I've said in quote number 2, I wasn't actually trying to say that this sort of phrase in the ATE case is something an atheist would seriously say. I wasn't saying that. What I'm actually saying is they'd be committed to saying it if they think they would say something like along those lines in the fine tuning case, and then I would say that you're in the horn with that it's not clearly true, because it's not clearly true that the atheist would be committed to saying something like this, because there's heavy disanalogies in the cases.
I'm having trouble connecting to the text. Like I'm trying to look exactly at what's said in that second one. Excuse me. And it seems like
what the text says, just take the interpretation.
Well, no, because the whole thing is like if we want to get another interpretation and then go over that one, that's fine. But I want to go kind of like
he's offered an interpretation.
Yeah, but what are we just going to not deal with the prior? Like the whole thing that I was wanting to talk about was, do all of these criticisms, all of the versions, just fall on one side of this dilemma or not? And
well, yes, I agree. It does. I agree.
Yeah,
because I agree that the interpretation that I've offered, regardless of whatever the text says, the interpretation that he's given does fall on one side of the horn, which is it's not clearly true.
Okay,
It's not
and
clearly
just
true that they're committed to saying it.
just to be clear, the one I don't know if we're talking about the same one. Like I feel like I'm a little more slow with going through these. I want to
I've
be
pruned,
really
sorry.
no, it's okay. It's so to be clear, the version where the atheist is saying, "So this isn't evidence for a designer," you said that's not something you would say. It's not something Troy would say either. That looks to me, and I think Matthew knows this and says, I'm not trying to address something that I think the competent proponents would say. But that's just to grant that it falls in that horn of the dilemma, where it's a straw man of those people. It sounds like you're talking about some other case where it's... Wait, just 1 second. It sounds like you're talking about another interpretation where it comes out false rather than straw man, but that's the one that I'm saying...
Matthew, I think so. The interpretation you've provided of the text comes out to the not reasonable to like a silly version of what an atheist would say.
Yes.
And I think the interpretation that Matthew has offered in response goes to the other horn of the dilemma, which is that it's not clear that it's true.
Right. So let's talk about that in a second. But first, okay. So that's yeah. So first, let's just get the first one off the table, which is when that's framed as when it's the atheist is saying this isn't evidence for a designer. That I think we all agree would be on the straw man horn, right?
Yeah. Sorry, just FYI, I'm gonna head out in like 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, so let's try to be quick then. So that version right there, you agree is just not a good representation of what the strong proponents would say.
Are you asking me or Avi?
I'm asking you now, yeah.
So I agree that's not what they would say, but I don't think the text says that's what they would say.
No, so I understand that you
just like in the baby case.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I understand that you're saying, okay, yeah, if I were trying to attack the strongest proponents of the view, then this would be a straw man. I agree. But, and here's where I save myself, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just giving a hypothetical thing someone would say. So the first point is just to acknowledge that it falls on one side of the dilemma. So it does fall on the straw man side of the dilemma. And then we could talk about, again, the initial point that I did with the goal setting and the virtues, right? We don't want really to present cases or arguments that are either false or only go through on a bad version of the other person's view. That's like suboptimal. We want to put forward something that'll go through against the strong versions of the view. So just there's a normative. There's two things to go through. We could talk. So we agree it falls on one horn of the dilemma, but then there's a question about whether what you're doing there is a good norm to have. And I think I forget exactly what I said, but I would say no, and I would talk about what I said at the start. There's another question about whatever the new version that's meant to rescue this, whether it just falls on another horn. And that's what Avi was getting at. He thinks, okay, even if we do a version 4, we still end up on one of the horns. It's just now you're on the other horn. So I don't know which is more important to cover, the normative thing or the whether version 4 falls on one of the horns again.
Sorry, I think we're looping a little bit. I feel like you're not quite getting my point.
Well, I'm not hearing a response to my point. That's what I'm stuck on. So, like, do you understand what I'm saying right now? I'm saying there's two directions we could go in the conversation, and I characterize both of those directions.
Yeah. So I think you're attributing what I'm saying to like some fourth version, but I'm just saying it's the plain reading of the thing you just read, and the plain reading of the thing that you just read is the thing Avi was talking about that Avi thinks is false, and we can talk about whether it's false. But
sorry, what's the
plain
reading?
So the plain reading. So I say, look, people make the stalking horse about fine tuning, but one could similarly make the stalking horse in the made by God case. And so if you agree that in the made by God case, it wouldn't make sense to make the stalking horse and treat that as a objection to the claim that fine tuning raises the likelihood of a designer, then you should think the same thing, namely that it's not a good objection to the claim that fine tuning raises. Sorry, I think I fucked up. Sorry, let me start over. So it's like you're raising stalking horse as an objection to fine tuning, but one could similarly raise stalking horse as an objection to if the initial condition spelled out made by God. And so then if you don't think that it disbars the initial conditions spelling out made by God from if you don't think that if you don't think that it disbars that from raising the likelihood of theism, then you shouldn't think that it disbars fine tuning from raising the likelihood.
I don't think I'm following. I'm trying to understand the thing that I'm hung up on, and what that is we're talking about the second version. Yeah, but you always right, like, I mean, we want to find out what's actually true and what actually makes sense. Like, that's what you got to do.
Wait, sorry, I didn't say anything just now.
Oh, I heard someone loudly exhale. I thought that was you trying to indicate boredom or something.
Sorry, it's possible. I mean, maybe I did.
Yeah,
I did not.
Yeah,
like,
so let's not do that.
To like
okay.
Signal anything. I don't actually think I did loudly.
Okay, well, maybe it was someone else. That's fine. But
I'm on a rocking chair that's making noise.
Maybe it's your rocking chair.
Or maybe it's the hammock, you know.
Okay, I don't know how you're in a rocking chair and a hammock.
Sorry, not a rocking chair, a hammock.
Right. Okay. Right. Version 2. No. Yeah. So okay. This isn't evidence for a designer. So we were just understanding that. Like you spelt it out. I think JMOS spelt it out there also, but it's just the probability of design on fine tuning is greater than the probability of design not on fine tuning. So as written there, so this isn't evidence for a designer. We agree that that's not what one of the competent proponents would say. So it falls on that the straw man arm.
No, but it's not a straw man because it's not purporting to be something that the proponent was saying. Just like in the
okay, I can reply to that. I understand that point. So that's fine. It's just it is were it to be an attack on the other side, it would be a straw man, and that's
dude. Sorry, it's an attack, but it's not purporting to be what they say.
Yeah. Well, look, the point is just if it's something that only a bad proponent of the other view would say, or that the best proponents wouldn't give, and your criticism is to go after that, like we would all feel shortchanged if we were attacked in that way.
Okay. All right.
Avi, 1 second. Avi, are you tracking what I'm saying here?
Go ahead. Can you just read?
So we're looking at this quote. So this isn't evidence for a designer. We're pointing out the smart atheists wouldn't say that. So that falls on the arm where it's a straw man. So he replies to that by saying, well, I'm not trying to characterize them, so it's not a straw man. And I say, that's fine. I can amend what I'm saying. It's in the category where it would be a straw man if it were an attack on, or if it were intended to be an attack on the strong versions of the view. And I'm pointing out that's still suboptimal. So there's like a normative question.
Do you understand Avi's interpretation of what I was saying?
No, I'm not. I don't think that's what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about when I read. So this isn't evidence for a designer. I'm just understanding that as meaning probability of design doesn't go up.
So
he's trying to say what Matthew's trying to say now is that.
Wait, but why are we jumping to? Why do we keep jumping to what he's saying now? Because it's like what I'm talking about is just
what I'm saying now is the interpretation of the thing I wrote.
But I want to talk about. Wait, but I don't know that I am misreading what you wrote, or that if I were misreading what you wrote, that would nullify my criticism, because it could be a misreading that is like reasonable to have or something like that. But just 1 second, because I want to just you're not 1 sec. We need just room here for a second. So just talking to Avi for a second here. So there's a further point about whatever interpretation he wants to give now, but there's an interpretation which I thought I heard earlier. We'd have to like track over the recording, but what I was understanding, it seems like we've been through a few different ones. So the very first one with "this isn't evidence for a designer," I was understanding that to mean on net theism doesn't do any better than atheism. We all determined that would be completely retarded. There was some other one that was probability of theism doesn't go up given this, and we also determined atheists wouldn't say that. So these are all falling on the straw man arm. And then there's some other version that we're trying to now zero in on.
All of those interpretations fall in the straw man arm.
Right.
And now the fork in the road with how much time Matthew has, you have to decide if you want to where you want to take this debate. Do you want to take this debate over the plausibility of the reading of that interpretation, which you can, and then you can have at it, or do you want to take the debate in the direction of what the interpretation Matthew is offering now for all of his versions?
So
I would be down to go to the next one. I just wanted to get us to agree on this one, and it sounded like he does agree it was a straw man. He's just saying
that's the interpretation.
You cut me off before I finished my sentence. It sounds like he said he would agree that it would be a straw man if it was actually targeted at the other side, but he's not trying to target it at the strongest proponents of the other side. He's just taking, for whatever reason, some like not particularly good version of the view and criticizing that. So
it sounds like he's saying that's not the sort of thing I meant to say at all. Now he's saying that this at no point was I trying to say that the atheists would even ever want to say something like this.
That's what he's trying to say now. Like something like this, as in, therefore, the probability of theism doesn't go up in virtue of this observation?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're getting mixed between these questions of what he meant versus what works or not.
So, do you want to take the debate?
Well, yeah. So I want to make a statement about why I'm processing it the way I am. So it's just because we tried to talk earlier about what this meant, because I gave one interpretation based on what he initially said in text, and then he didn't like that one, and then he shifted it over to another one where so this isn't evidence for a designer just means so the probability of theism doesn't go up. So I was responding to that one, and it sounds like now we're saying that that's not even what was meant, and there's a fourth one coming up. So it's like I guess I want to sidestep the what he meant, because that's a more fuzzy, empirical, psychological thing, and just grant that the interpretation I'm talking about would be obviously a straw man of any competent proponent, and then move to the whatever the new one is. So
I think if you want to take the debate in that direction, it'll probably take up the remainder of the debate time available, which is fine. So you want to take the debate?
Sorry, I was going to go in like a minute.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, you always have. So you did kind of ask if I would say this, and I do kind of say this. I think that it's once it starts getting kind of like technical and precise, and we start, pressing on the view, and it looks like you're kind of in a corner. It's like that does seem like kind of when you leave. Like I would be more impressed if you would stick it out and actually defend. Yeah,
like
Matthew,
2
that's not.
hours.
You need to understand that's not how things work. Okay, it's not like, oh, you have intellectual virtue if you last a certain amount of time in a conversation. Like, it's about what the conversation is about and what actually happens in it and what gets meaningfully addressed. Sometimes things take a long time to hash out. I think when Freud and Jung first met, they sat and just talked for like 13 hours or something. Like, things take time to go over. You can't, like, this is what Lance says, and he's right. You can't just put some little perfunctory chunk of time towards something and then go, it's been addressed and I'm out of there. I mean, you can, but I don't think I would be impressed with that, and I think I would say the same kind of thing.
You're confused about what I was saying, and I don't think it's like
okay. Wait. You keep saying that I'm confused, but like, let's, instead of saying that, let's like actually just. Well, I would say let's stay on track and go through it, but it sounds like you're saying you don't want to go through anymore. Which is fine if you just don't want to. I mean, I don't think it's fine. I think it's a lack of virtue. But if you just want to nope out of the conversation, that's fine.
The person's confused about what you're saying that you like.
Yeah, you haven't established that I'm. So first of all, there's probably a sense in which I'm confused. Like, I'm not following how some of the things you say respond or deal with the kind of criticism that's being raised. So there might be a sense in which there is not understanding, and that's actually just a problem for you. Like, you're fucking up. But yeah, no, I mean, what I would say is that we should continue getting through things. We got like, around halfway through, and now I think the thing to clear up is that on the interpretation where this isn't evidence for a designer means so the probability of theism doesn't go up, that falls on the straw man horn. And then if there's some other interpretation that you want to try to run that you think escapes the dilemma, then to run that.
I'd be happy to pick this up some other time if you'd like.
Okay, but, well, the ball is in your court. I'm not going to chase you and pull teeth.
I would, if possible, because there is an aspect about this that is important to me. If I could get just the last word on why I think, just building on the aliens thing, on why I think it's, on why, and more broadly, why I think it's false. That conditional, it falls on the false end of the horn.
Yeah, I mean, well, wait, sorry. Are you responding to what I'm?
Once you guys are about to, I'm just asking for like a last word, at least before.
Yeah, I'll head out, but feel free, Avi, to have the last word here.
Well, no, I for you to hear it, Matthew, not for you to.
Did he just disappear? Yeah, just typical.
Okay, that was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like, it's so funny because he tried to hedge against this by being like, well, if I talk for 45 minutes and then go, you're not going to say I'm like, being evasive and blah, blah, blah. And I told him, I was like, I don't think you get intellectual virtue based on lasting like a certain time in a conversation. It's about meaningfully dealing with criticism. And I think so far, I mean, you can tell me if your assessment differs. I highly doubt it does. But it just seems like everything he says just falls on one side of the dilemma or on the other. And the cases where he tries to own it falling on the other side, like, yeah, it would be a straw man, but I'm not actually trying to characterize their view. That just means in some broader sense that he's doing something kind of shitty, which is just like dealing with the other side's view by only engaging with the worst version. In fact, you could really change the straw man horn into something like that. It's only a straw man, I guess, if you're trying to represent the strongest position. But if you're not even trying to, and it just would be a straw man word applied to the strongest position, well, that just says something shitty about how you're arguing. So yeah, I mean, it just looks to me like the first one falls on the not clearly true horn. The interpretation, well, we have different interpretations for the second one, but it seemed like a handful of them fell on the straw man horn. I'll just keep calling it that. But, if this isn't evidence for a designer means on net, theism does worse, which is how he initially explained it in text. People can go kind of read through that if they want. I mean, that turns out obviously being a straw man. No one's going to say that. Maybe theism does better on other virtues or something. And if we go to the other interpretation where it's what does he say? Oh, the probability of theism doesn't go up in virtue of this. Well, it seems like, of design. It seems like that's also not the kind of thing that the competent proponents of the stalking horse would say. You wouldn't say it. Troy wouldn't say it. I wouldn't really call myself a stalking horse person, but I certainly would not say it. And then it seemed like there was a final interpretation that we didn't get into because I was still trying to get a sign off on the third one. But I don't know. Do you disagree with any of the analysis that I just gave there?
Sorry, I was just very frustrated about what just happened.
Oh, are you like typing at him?
Yes.
What did you say?
No, I basically told him, like, when I said if I can get a word in, or it doesn't even have to be a last word, even though I said last word. It was for him to at least hear. I wasn't asking to talk to a room. Like
Yeah, you can talk to other people about my view while I leave. Okay, cool.
Yeah, like I wasn't. Yeah, that's what I was asking. Now, if you want to just leave, then just say no, like, or at least not to me. Don't get any word to me. That's fine. Just say that then. Don't just say, oh yeah, you can get the last word. I'm gonna leave. Like, no, I clearly meant to say something to you so that you would hear it. Like, I didn't want to just talk to a room.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we could still hear out what you're saying on that, but I agree, it's just shitty. And the thing is, like, people might not get this because they might be seeing this in isolation and being like, oh, it's not that bad to leave. It's like, yeah, but it's a very persistent kind of pattern with Matthew where it's always that he kind of, like, even this bare minimum, I suspect it might have just been because Lance was getting on his ass yesterday. So he's like, oh, okay, I got to go do some due diligence so I can say I talked to Avi and Isaac because that's part of what Lance criticized me. Like, I just think that in general, he does not actively seek out the strongest objections to his view. And when he does talk to people who have good criticisms, he doesn't stick out the conversation properly to a concession, and doesn't follow up. Now, he might do that just in virtue of me making a video where I say that he doesn't do it, just to try to balance the scales. But yeah, my general kind of problem with him is just he's not like super low intellectual virtue. Like, you can't get him to hear criticism at all. You can't get any, but it's also, he's certainly not virtuous. He doesn't actively seek criticism from the strongest people. He always does this little perfunctory, hear out a bit of criticism, then dip, and then not adjust, not make any concessions where they're due. I assume you agree with all of this. Avi, are you paying attention?
I mean, what I want to say, I mean, yeah.
No, but I'm not talking about what you want to say. I'm talking about what I want to say. We can talk about what you want to say next.
Sure. No, I agree. Sorry, I'm just
Well, okay, just pay attention here for a sec. Go back to Matthew after, okay?
Sure.
So, firstly, virtue point. Not zero virtue, not particularly virtuous, middling virtue. You got to pull some teeth. You can get him to engage for a bit, but he doesn't really hear you out a lot of the time for really a truly protracted, like get it. He doesn't really get into it and get to resolution. He does often this little perfunctory, here's a bit of engagement, and then doesn't follow up on anything, doesn't come up with counters, usually just goes on saying the same kind of stuff. So that's the virtue point. He's like middling in intellectual virtue. I assume we agree about that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other point, and then after this we can talk about your point. The other point is just about the actual criticism I'm running. And the criticism is just this dilemma of this something has gone wrong point seems to always come out either just not being clearly true or being true in virtue of targeting a bad version of the other guy's view. And it seems like every single version that he's given, and we can talk about your point with the fourth version, has that problem. So like the very first version just wasn't clearly true. The second version, he appends something, right? He says, so this isn't evidence for a designer. And we talked about different interpretations there. Does that mean theism doesn't do better on, or theism doesn't do better on net? Does that mean that the probability of theism doesn't go up at all? It just seems like these things are strawmans of what competent stalking horse proponents would say. You wouldn't say, therefore, design does worse overall because there's other virtues to consider. You also wouldn't say, therefore, probability of design doesn't go up at all because given your background knowledge, you do think it goes up if you see initial conditions language. So these are just straw men of what the atheist or stalking horse proponent is saying. Now, is you with me so far, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, there's a further move he made of going, well, it's not a straw man because I'm not trying to represent the best version of the other side's view. So at that point, I kind of adjust the dilemma a bit. I go, okay, yeah, sure. If straw man requires, intentionality or something, then fine. We won't say straw man. We'll just say, attacking a weak version of the view. So the dilemma becomes the something has gone wrong point either isn't clearly true or targets a weak version of the view. So fixating on the word straw, I can understand why you don't want to be seen as doing something that has bad connotation, but the general point still goes through.
There's still something with a bad connotation there.
Yes, it's just the bad connotation shifts, I guess, more to one that
from one thing to another thing.
Yeah, and arguably one that is less negative. Like straw man is like sounds shittier than like just didn't represent other side well, but still clearly bad and still clearly something that, as per the initial goalposts that I tried to set up there, is something that you wouldn't want to do. You don't want to run a criticism that is only true, or that is either not true or only true of some bad version of the view, unless if that really is your intention and there's some purpose for you in doing that, you make it clear that that's what you're doing. Like, okay, so I'm targeting now this like really weak possible version of this view, and that would fail for this reason. So that's just basically another point that like, even if you say technically not straw man, just not a strong representation of the other side's view, then you still more or less fall in the dilemma, because I'm happy to modify it from straw man to just attacking weak version of other view. I assume you're with me so far about.
I'm following everything.
Yeah. So point there is just saying not technically a straw man doesn't really get you out of anything. It just, you modify the phrasing of the dilemma a bit and you still get hit with a pretty negative thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then that's all of my points. It sounds like, I wanted to go through the third one and point out how it has the same problem as the second one. And I was down to also hear his other interpretation. But I wanted to focus on going through those first. Do you want to? Yeah.
What he would want to say is that his interpretation he's offering now is really what.
Also, before you continue, I also just want to flag. I think he shifted around throughout the conversation. I don't think that this is his interpretation from the start. I'm pretty fucking sure that he said at one point something roughly like what J Moss said. I suspect that's why J Moss said it there.
Right. No, I'm just saying what he was saying now. Like he was.
Yeah. So I just want to flag that because otherwise it might have the connotation of.
Is my mic bad?
No, you're fine. I just wanted to flag that because otherwise it might have the connotation of, oh, I just didn't follow Matthew the entire time.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, wait, someone's saying it is bad.
Who's saying that? You have.
Bad?
It's very quiet. Like, I thought I had him turned down for a second.
That's weird.
Oh, hold on.
He's a little quiet, but he's not super quiet.
Off. Okay, what about now? How is it now?
No.
It's about the same.
So you're still.
Oh.
Do you have him turned down, maybe, Anne?
No, I double checked. I've got him up almost all the way. In fact, there's an echo now.
Okay, because I turned echo.
Okay, you're just gonna have to proceed. You are audible if we listen carefully.
What about noise suppress? What about now? How is it now?
It all sounds similar to me. I don't know. Oh, okay. I haven't had trouble though. You're a bit quieter, but it's not like inaudible. You should fix it at some point, but not. You're fine though.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, so the other interpretation, which is not clearly the interpretation he actually had the whole time.
Right. So yeah, he's gonna. You could say it's false what he's saying, but he's gonna say like his interpretation is what it is, what the correct quote unquote interpretation is for all versions.
Right? And I just have to say another thing. I think he always reads a new charitable interpretation. I don't know if it's just that he lacks like kind of self-awareness of like what he might have meant initially, or if it's like an ego thing and he's trying to save the position. But to me, it seems like with Matthew, there's always a reinterpretation. Again, some of these things are like patterns. But it seems like there's always some reinterpretation that tries to save the position. And it often seems like reinterpretation 2 isn't like consistent with reinterpretation 3. Like it seems like it keeps changing how it's getting reinterpreted. So I kind of, that's part of why I like to like lock down, like, okay, here's one way to understand it. That doesn't work. Here's another. That doesn't. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. I was just sorry. I was fiddling with the.
Whatever you did fixed it, obviously.
Oh, hold on. Let me do it again. Then, like this. Did this fix it?
Yeah,
Hello?
I don't know what happened. You're so much
Okay.
louder now. Before it was
All
like you were like a mouse in the corner of my
Yeah.
house, just like in the corner somewhere.
Sure.
A hole in the wall.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I might echo a bit more, but we'll see.
At least she
Okay.
called you a mouse and not a rat. That's an improvement in what Jews are being
There you
referred to
go,
as.
exactly.
Oh, I thought that was going to be some vegan thing. I was like, well, I don't discriminate amongst animals. You know, they're all the same.
All right. So, okay, what I wanted to say about okay, so what I want to say about this idea, this is the real thing I wanted to hone in on, is this conditional bullshit, where it's like, okay, well, if they say this thing in the fine tuning context, they're committed to it in the ATE context, and it's certainly not clearly true. Like that. So what your criticism is, it's not clearly true, and the reason it's not clearly true is because when you divorce the ATE context of its relevant properties that have the persuasive force, then it's not clearly true that the fine tuning context should have persuasive force, and you could just divorce, like go through the examples and divorce it. Like for example, where we were at in the conversation there, where like Matthew offered an example of like, okay, let's say the stars spelled out, love one another in all the languages. Well, maybe you could make an argument that it's, at least some evidence for theism over naturalism, but it's not clearly evidence for theism over naturalism in a background context where that wouldn't take a chainsaw to the current naturalistic theories, and in the current background knowledge of all like the theistic hypotheses we have. It's not, all things considered, it's not clearly evidence for one over the other. At least some naturalistic hypotheses it would cut against. At least some theistic hypotheses it would cut against. It would certainly cut against. It would, and what is explained with, like, if it was a matrix or aliens, there's some naturalistic hypotheses that would cut against. There's some theistic hypotheses that would cut against. But again, my priors are at least somewhat informed by what types of theistic hypotheses are put forth and what types of naturalistic hypotheses are put forth to inform those priors. So, for example, if all of the theistic hypotheses, if I were brought up in a world where all the theistic hypotheses stipulated that that stars are not the sort of thing that aliens could create and put into certain positions, well then, that would, maybe there is still some theistic hypotheses that posits that they could, but my priors on what the probability space of theism would be, at least somewhat informed by that. And so I would think that more of the probability space of theism is cut against with that than the probability space of naturalism. And so when I look at the current state, almost no naturalistic hypothesis posits that, well, that they seriously posit that, that's just something incompatible with naturalism. If aliens or a simulated universe would just spell out love one another, whereas with theism, like if the aliens created that and love one another, whereas with theism, there are actually, for the majority of history, it was the predominant version of theism that posited this. Just that would not be compatible with theism. Like, the prevailing views of theism were creationist hypotheses. In fact, even today, a non-trivial subset of theistic hypotheses are creationist hypotheses that don't just posit that God created the universe by just like, they posit that God put the planets where they are. And these are not the sort of things that, like, the aliens could create, could just go around creating and saying, oh, love one another. So yeah, there's an asymmetry there that's informed by the priors. And even if you don't buy this argument, that would make some sort of asymmetry if this is one of the explanations. It's certainly not clearly false, and it's not clear. So this goes back to the whole thing about, is it clearly not true? Is it clearly true? And it's not clearly true. It's not clearly true that, going back to what we're talking about, it's not clearly true that there's a condition. The conditional is clearly true. That if we're committed to saying this in the ATE, if all the relevant parts of the ATE that are persuasive and forced are just divorced from the ATE, which would be the case in the FTE, in the fine-tuning example. Because that's the whole feature. And to whatever degree that it's not, I'll also add, like, it'll be really weak evidence, which isn't the sort of thing they want to get at. But yeah, it's certainly not clearly true. I mean, just think about how the force that's taken away now. Like, you're in a context where you can't say that it contradicts the naturalist background knowledge in any way, or undermines it, or it's at odds with it. And you're also in a context where the observation doesn't clearly point to any theistic hypothesis or theism broadly. And if it's just not clearly the case, then that it is evidence. Maybe it is, but it's not prima facie clear. So yeah, I want to say there's no reason to accept that. It's no reason to accept it. I also think it's false, but minimally, it's not clearly true. So it falls on that end of the horn, where it's like, what reason do we have to think that conditional is true? Like, substantiate the conditional. Like, you're talking about a context where you've put the naturalist in a position where they have to take a chainsaw to all of their background, to basically the relevant background knowledge they have. They'd have to upend a whole bunch of mature sciences. And then you're also building into the evidence very specific things that point to specific versions of theism, or theism broadly, like made by God, or like the resurrection of a very specific figure in Christianity. If you take all of that away, as the fine-tuning context does not have, there's no relevant mature science that says much of anything about, beyond speculation, much of anything that you'd have to upend about any natural predisposition or whatnot of the universe at the level that it would regulate the constants. So that's not there. The other thing that's not there is there's nothing specific about the constants that point to theism directly. Like, they don't spell out God, or they don't spell out a specific version of theism either. Like, they don't use language to do that. So if you divorce those things, then why is it clearly the case that if someone says it's not evidence there, that it is evidence in the ATE case? Like, that's pretty bonkers to make a claim like that. It's certainly unsubstantiated to me. To whatever degree it's true, it would be very weak evidence, and it's not clear that it is. You might think it is, but it's not clear that it is. And that's the whole point. The whole point here is it's supposed to be a clear thing, because it's supposed to be a reductio if you say it's not. Like, that's the key. So I get that it's a reductio if you say it's not in the ATE, but I don't get it's certainly not a reductio if I say it's not in the ATE that's divorced of its relevant persuasive features that are not present in the FTE, in the fine-tuning context. So what we need from people who advance this argument is a fucking argument for the conditional. What's the argument for the conditional? Why is the conditional true? Like, don't just give it as a premise, substantiate it, but get at the supporting argument for this conditional. That if I think, because someone did a stalking horse and came to the conclusion that when all is said and done, on all the features on net, all the theoretical virtues on net, that there's, it doesn't do any work for theism over naturalism. Why the hell am I supposed to believe that they're committed to saying the same thing in ATE context, in awesome theistic evidence context, particularly when the major playing persuasive features are not present in FTE but are in ATE? What's the argument? What's the argument for that conditional? That's what I want. And I haven't seen one. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I don't know if if I have anything else to say, I guess just kind of summarizing where we're at without going through everything. It just seems like there's a dilemma. It seems like the something has gone wrong point either targets a version of the stalking horse where it's not clearly true that something has gone wrong, or targets a version where it is true, but as a consequence of making it true, they end up targeting a weak version of the stalking horse. It seems like everything Matthew has said falls under that. It seems like when he tries to give other interpretations, though it can be hard to just get them to go one by one through them, they all fall under that also. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is there anything you would add?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't add anything. I'd be repeating myself. Just provide the argument for the conditional.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna stop the recording there.